The airport was a cacophony of rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and muffled announcements echoing through the cavernous terminal. Eleanor Grayson, 78 years old, stood frozen near Gate 17, her gnarled hands gripping the handle of her battered suitcase. Her silver hair caught the fluorescent light, and her sharp blue eyes scanned the crowd, searching for faces that should have been familiar. Her son, Michael, and his wife, Laura, were nowhere to be seen. They had promised to meet her here. They had planned this trip for months of family vacation to Hawaii, a rare chance for Eleanor to escape the monotony of her small, empty apartment in Cleveland. She'd packed light, just as Michael had instructed, her heart buoyant with the thought of warm beaches and time with her grandchildren. But now, the gate was empty. The plane to Honolulu had boarded 30 minutes ago, and the last stragglers were vanishing down the jetway. Eleanor's chest tightened. She shuffled toward the check-in counter, her knees aching from standing too long. The young woman behind the desk glanced up, her smile professional but strained. "Ma'am, can I help you?" "My family," Eleanor said, her voice trembling but firm. "They were supposed to meet me here. Flight 482 to Honolulu. I don't see them." The woman's fingers flew over the keyboard. Her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. That flight's already boarded. Let me check the manifest." A pause. Then her eyes softened with pity. "There's no Eleanor Grayson listed. Are you sure you were booked on this flight?" Eleanor's heart sank. She fumbled in her purse, pulling out a crumpled itinerary Michael had emailed her. "Here," she said, sliding it across the counter. "My son sent me this." The woman scanned the paper, her expression growing more uncomfortable. "This is just a confirmation of their booking. It lists Michael Grayson, Laura Grayson, and 2 children. There's no additional passenger." The words hit Eleanor like a slap. She gripped the counter's edge, her knuckles whitening. "That's not possible. They told me we were all going together. They said," her voice cracked. She remembered Michael's rushed phone call last week. His vague assurances, "Mom, we'll handle everything. Just be at the airport." The woman hesitated, then leaned forward. "Do you have a way to contact them? Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." Eleanor nodded numbly, pulling out her old flip phone. Her hands shook as she dialed Michael's number. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. She tried Laura. Straight to voicemail. A cold dread settled in her stomach. She called again, then texted, her fingers clumsy on the tiny keys. "Where are you?" "I'm at the airport. Gate 17. No response. The terminal seemed to close in around her. Families rushed past, laughing, dragging colorful luggage. A young couple argued over a boarding pass. A child wailed nearby. Eleanor felt like a ghost, invisible in the chaos. She sank onto a nearby bench, her suitcase at her feet, and stared at the itinerary in her lap. The truth was dawning. Sharp and cruel, they had left her behind. She thought back to the last few months. Michael and Laura had been distant, their visits to her apartment growing shorter, their calls more perfunctory. She'd overheard Laura muttering once about how much easier it would be if Eleanor wasn't always hovering. At the time, Eleanor had brushed it off, chalking it up to stress. But now, the pieces clicked into place. They hadn't forgotten her. They'd chosen to leave her. Anger flickered in her chest, a spark in the ashes of her hurt. Eleanor had spent her life sacrificing for Michael, working double shifts as a nurse to pay for his college, staying up late to help with his homework, giving up her own dreams to ensure he had a future. And this was how he repaid her. by stranding her in an airport, alone, while he jetted off with his family. She stood, her resolve hardening. If they thought they could discard her like an old coat, they were wrong. Eleanor Grayson was not helpless. She'd survived a tough childhood, a cheating husband, and years of scraping by. She wasn't about to let this betrayal define her. Her eyes fell on her purse, where she kept a small notebook with important numbers. Among them was the contact for Michael's financial advisor, a man named Richard who'd helped Eleanor set up a trust years ago. Michael and Laura didn't know she still had access to that account in old joint savings they'd set up for family emergencies. It was the same account they'd been dipping into for this vacation, assuming Eleanor wouldn't notice. A plan began to form, sharp and daring. If they could abandon her, she could make sure their precious vacation came at a cost. She flipped open her phone and dialed Richard's number. "Richard, it's Eleanor Grayson," she said, her voice steady now. "I need to make some changes to the family trust. Immediately." As she spoke, the airport's noise faded into the background. Eleanor felt a surge of purpose, her heart pounding not with fear, but with defiance. They'd left her behind, but she wasn't going to disappear quietly. Eleanor sat in a quiet corner of the airport's coffee shop, the bitter taste of decaf lingering on her tongue. Her notebook lay open on the table, scribbled with numbers and names. Richard's voice had been calm, but surprised when she'd called. "Eleanor, are you sure about this?" He'd asked when she outlined her plan. She was sure, more sure than she'd been about anything in years. The family trust, originally set up to cover emergencies, had grown over time. Eleanor had contributed most of it, squirreling away her savings from decades of nursing. Michael and Laura had added to it sporadically, but they'd been using it lately for luxury's new furniture, a car lease, and now this extravagant Hawaiian vacation. Eleanor had never minded. She'd wanted her son to have a good life. But now, knowing they'd deliberately excluded her, she saw the account in a new light, a tool for justice. She'd instructed Richard to transfer the bulk of the trust, nearly $50,000, into a new account under her name alone. It wasn't theft, she told herself. It was hers by right, her years of toil and sacrifice. Michael and Laura would still have enough for their trip, but the lavish extras, the private cabana, the snorkeling tours, the five-star dinners would be out of reach. Let them scramble, she thought. Let them feel what it's like to be left with nothing. As she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Finally, Mom. So sorry. We got caught up at check-in. We're on the plane now. Can you catch the next flight? I'll book it when we land." Eleanor stared at the message, her lips pressing into a thin line. The lie was flimsy, transparent. If they'd been caught up, they would have called her, texted her, waited for her. Instead, they'd boarded without a backward glance. She typed a reply, her fingers deliberate. "Don't worry about me. Enjoy your trip." She hit send, then turned off her phone. Let them wonder. She leaned back, her mind drifting to the past. Michael hadn't always been this way. As a boy, he'd been her shadow, trailing her through the hospital where she worked, his eyes wide with admiration. "You're a hero, Mom," he'd said once, watching her bandage a patient's wound. But somewhere along the way, life had changed him. Or maybe Laura had. Eleanor didn't know. What she did know was that the son she'd raised wouldn't have left her stranded. The coffee shop's hum was interrupted by a young man sliding into the seat across from her. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, his voice gentle. He was in his 30s, with kind brown eyes and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Eleanor nodded, too weary to object. He introduced himself as Sam, a grad student heading home to Chicago. "You look like you've had a rough day," he said, not prying but inviting her to share. She hesitated, then found herself telling him the story, not all of it, but enough. The abandoned vacation. The family who'd left her behind. Sam listened, his face softening with empathy. "That's awful," he said. "But you know, sometimes family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up for you." His words struck a chord. Eleanor had spent so long clinging to the idea of family, her son, her grandchildren, that she'd ignored the emptiness it brought. Maybe it was time to redefine what family meant. Sam glanced at his watch. "My flight's boarding soon. But you want some company until you figure out your next step." Eleanor smiled, a small but genuine warmth spreading through her. "I'd like that," she said. They talked for an hour. About his studies, her nursing days, the little joys of life. When Sam left for his gate, he scribbled his number on a napkin. "Call me if you're ever in Chicago," he said. "You've got a friend there." Alone again, Eleanor felt lighter. She opened her notebook and began to plan. The money from the trust wasn't just about punishing Michael and Laura. It was about reclaiming her life. She'd always wanted to travel, to see the world beyond Cleveland's gray winters. Maybe she'd book her own trip somewhere quiet, somewhere hers. As she left the coffee shop, her suitcase rolling behind her, Eleanor felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years: possibility. The airport, once a place of betrayal, now felt like a crossroads. She wasn't sure where she was going, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to find out. Eleanor checked into a modest hotel near the airport, the kind with faded carpets and complimentary coffee that tasted like regret. She sat on the edge of the bed, her suitcase unopened, and stared at the city skyline through the window. Cleveland's lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the life she'd lived for others. Tonight, she decided, was for her. She pulled out her notebook and began researching on her phone, its small screen straining her eyes. The trust money was now secure in her new account, confirmed by a follow-up call with Richard. She'd left just enough in the old account to cover Michael and Laura's basic expenses: flights, a budget hotel, but nothing more. The thought of their confusion when their credit cards declined brought a grim satisfaction. But Eleanor wasn't cruel. She didn't want them stranded. She just wanted them to feel the sting of consequences. Her mind wandered to her grandchildren, Sophie and Ethan. They were only 10 and 7, too young to understand their parents' choices. Eleanor's heart ached at the thought of them caught in this mess. She'd always been their confidant, the one who baked cookies and told stories of her nursing days. Would they think she'd abandoned them? She pushed the thought away. This wasn't about them. It was about standing up for herself. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She called a travel agent, a luxury she hadn't allowed herself in decades. "I want to go somewhere peaceful," she told the woman on the phone. "Somewhere with history. Maybe a small town. I'm starting over." The agent suggested Savannah, Georgia, place of cobblestone streets, historic homes, and quiet beauty. Eleanor booked a one-way ticket for the next day, along with a week at a charming bed-and-breakfast. The cost dipped into her new account, but it felt like an investment in herself. She wasn't running away. She was running toward something new. As she packed, her phone buzzed again. Another text from Michael. "Mom, what's going on? The account's almost empty. We can't pay for anything here. Call me." Eleanor read it, then set the phone face down. She'd deal with him later, when she was ready. For now, she needed to focus on her own path. The flight to Savannah was smooth, the plane half empty. Eleanor watched the clouds from her window seat, her mind a mix of nerves and excitement. When she landed, the air was warm, thick with the scent of magnolias. The bed and breakfast, a pastel-colored house with a wraparound porch, felt like a hug. The owner, a woman named Clara, was about Eleanor's age, with a quick laugh and stories of her own. "You're here to find yourself, aren't you?" Clara said, pouring sweet tea. Eleanor smiled, unsure how to answer. "Maybe," she said. "I've spent a long time being someone else's something mother, wife, nurse. I want to know who I am now." Clara nodded knowingly. "Savannah's good for that. Walk the squares. Listen to the stories in the stones. You'll find what you're looking for." Over the next few days, Eleanor explored Savannah. She wandered through Forsyth Park, its fountains sparkling in the sunlight, and sat on benches listening to street musicians. She visited historic homes, their walls whispering tales of resilience and reinvention. Each step felt like shedding a layer of the old Eleanor, the one who'd let herself be overlooked, who'd accepted less than she deserved. One afternoon, in a small bookstore, she met a group of women her age who invited her to their book club. They were lively, opinionated, and fiercely independent, swapping stories of their own battles and triumphs. Eleanor felt a spark of belonging, something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. They exchanged numbers, promising to meet again. As the week drew to a close, Eleanor sat on the porch of the bed and breakfast, a journal in her lap. She wrote about the airport, the betrayal, the money. But she also wrote about Savannah, the colors, the people, the sense of possibility. She wasn't just surviving. She was rebuilding. The anger that had fueled her plan was fading, replaced by a quiet strength. She didn't need Michael and Laura's approval to live well. She didn't need anyone's. Her phone buzzed again, Laura this time. Her message sharp. "Eleanor, this is unacceptable. You've ruined our trip. Explain yourself." Eleanor stared at the words, then typed a simple reply. "I'm taking care of myself now. You should try it." She hit send, then powered off her phone. The evening air was soft, and for the first time in years, Eleanor felt free. Savannah's charm worked its way into Eleanor's bones. She extended her stay at the bed and breakfast, reluctant to leave the city that felt like a second chance. Each morning, she woke to the smell of Clara's homemade biscuits and the sound of birds outside her window. She'd started a routine: coffee on the porch, walks through the historic district, and evenings with her new book club friends. They called themselves the Silver Readers, a nod to their gray hair and sharp wit. Eleanor hadn't laughed so much in years, but the shadow of her family lingered. Michael and Laura's messages had grown more insistent, alternating between anger and guilt trips. "Mom, the kids are asking for you. How could you do this?" Michael wrote. "We're stuck in a cheap motel because of you," Laura added. Eleanor read each one, her heart twisting, but she didn't respond. Not yet. She needed time to decide what she owed them, if anything. One afternoon, while browsing a local art gallery, Eleanor met a painter named Thomas, a man in his 60s with a warm smile and hands stained with color. He was displaying a series of portraits, each capturing the spirit of Savannah's eldersmen and women who'd lived through wars, losses, and triumphs. "You've got a story in your eyes," Thomas told her, studying her face. "Mind if I paint you?" Eleanor laughed, flustered. "Me? I'm nobody special." "That's where you're wrong," he said. "Every line on your face is a chapter. I'd like to tell it." Curiosity got the better of her, and she agreed. Over the next few days, she sat for him in his sunlit studio, sharing bits of her life as he worked. She told him about the airport, the trust, The betrayal. Thomas listened, his brush moving with care. You didn't just take their money, he said one day, pausing to mix colors. You took back your power. His words stayed with her. Power. She hadn't thought of it that way. But he was right. For too long, she'd let others define her worth, her ex-husband, her son, even her patients. Now, she was choosing herself. It was exhilarating and terrifying. When Thomas finished the portrait, Eleanor barely recognized the woman staring back. The painting showed her as she was silver hair, lined face but with a fire in her eyes, a strength she hadn't seen in herself before. That's you, Thomas said, smiling. The real you. She bought the painting, though it cost more than she'd planned. It felt like a declaration, a reminder of who she was becoming. She hung it in her room at the bed and breakfast, where it caught the morning light. Clara, seeing it, clapped her hands. That's my girl, she said. You're blooming, Eleanor. But blooming came with challenges. One evening, as Eleanor sat with the silver readers, her phone rang. It was Sophie, her granddaughter, her voice small and tearful. Grandma, why aren't you here? Mom and Dad said you didn't want to come. Eleanor's heart broke. She stepped outside, clutching the phone. Oh, sweetie, that's not true. I wanted to be with you so badly. Your parents, they made a mistake. But I'm okay, and I'll see you soon. I promise. Sophie sniffled. I miss you. Dad's mad all the time now. They keep fighting. I'm sorry, honey, Eleanor said, her voice thick. I'll fix this. I love you. When the call ended, she sat on the porch, staring at the stars. She couldn't let her grandchildren pay for their parents' mistakes. But she also couldn't go back to being the doormat she'd been. The next day, she called Richard again. I want to set up a new trust, she told him. For Sophie and Ethan's education. They shouldn't suffer because of this. She allocated a portion of her new account for the kids, ensuring it was untouchable by Michael and Laura. It felt right. A way to protect what mattered without compromising her own future. As her second week in Savannah ended, Eleanor began to consider staying permanently. Clara offered her a long-term rate at the bed and breakfast, and the silver readers encouraged her to join their community. She even started volunteering at a local senior center, sharing her nursing skills with those who needed them. Each step felt like building a new life, brick by brick. But the past wasn't done with her. Late one night, Michael called. His voice was raw, desperate. Mom, we're coming home early. The trip's a disaster. We need to talk. Please. Eleanor listened, her heart torn between anger and pity. I'll be here, she said finally. But things are different now. Michael. You'll see. She hung up, her hands steady. Whatever came next, she was ready. Eleanor stood on the porch of the bed and breakfast, watching the street as a choo-choo pulled up. Michael stepped out, his face drawn, followed by Laura, whose eyes were red-rimmed. Sophie and Ethan tumbled out last, their faces lighting up when they saw her. Grandma, they shouted, running to her. Eleanor knelt, wrapping them in her arms, her heart swelling despite the tension in the air. Michael approached slowly, his hands in his pockets. Mom, he said, his voice low. We need to talk. Eleanor stood, her expression calm but unyielding. Yes, we do. But first, let's get the kids settled. Clara appeared, offering to take Sophie and Ethan inside for cookies, leaving Eleanor, Michael, and Laura on the porch. The air was thick with unspoken words. Laura spoke first, her voice sharp. Eleanor, what you did was unforgivable. You drained our account. We couldn't even afford decent meals. Eleanor met her gaze. And what you did, Laura, leaving me at the airport, lying to your children about it, was that forgivable? Michael flinched, but Laura pressed on. We didn't mean to leave you. It was a mix-up. The tickets. Don't. Eleanor cut in. I saw the itinerary. My name wasn't on it. You planned this. Her voice was steady, but the hurt was there, raw and undeniable. Michael ran a hand through his hair. Mom, I'm sorry. It was complicated. Laura thought it'd be easier without. He trailed off, unable to meet her eyes. Without me, Eleanor finished. Because I'm old. A burden. Tell me, Michael, when did I become someone you could discard? He looked stricken. You're not a burden. We messed up. I messed up. Eleanor let the silence hang, heavy and deliberate. She'd spent days preparing for this moment, replaying her hurt, her anger, her resolve. You did, she said finally. But I'm not here to punish you forever. I've taken what's mine from the trust. The rest is still there for you. And I've set up a new fund for Sophie and Ethan's future. You can't touch it. Laura's eyes widened. You had no right. I had every right, Eleanor said, her voice rising. That money was mostly mine. I worked for it, saved it, while you spent it on vacations and cars. I'm done being invisible. Michael reached for her hand, but she pulled back. Mom, please. How do we fix this? Eleanor looked at him, seeing the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. You start by listening, she said. By respecting me. I'm not just your mother, I am a person. And I'm building a life here. One that doesn't revolve around you. Laura looked away, her jaw tight. But Michael nodded slowly. I want to make this right, he said. Can we stay? Talk more. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. For the kids' sake. Yes. But things won't go back to how they were. Over the next few days, Michael and his family stayed in Savannah. Eleanor spent time with Sophie and Ethan, taking them to the park, telling them stories, rebuilding the bond that had been strained. Michael joined her on walks, his apologies halting but sincere. Laura remained distant, but Eleanor didn't push. Some bridges took time to mend or didn't mend at all. One evening, as Eleanor and Michael sat on the porch, he opened up. I didn't realize how much I'd hurt you, he said. Laura, she's been stressed, and I let her convince me you'd be better off at home. I was wrong. Eleanor listened, her heart softening but not yielding. I forgive you, Michael, she said. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I'm staying here. I found something real, friends. Purpose. I'm not going back to Cleveland. Michael's eyes glistened. I don't want to lose you, Mom. You won't, she said. But you have to meet me halfway. Be my son, not my keeper. When they left for Cleveland, Eleanor hugged them tightly, especially Sophie and Ethan. She promised to visit, to call, to be part of their life, but on her terms. As their choo-choo drove away, she felt a pang of loss, but also freedom. She'd reclaimed her voice, her worth. Months passed, and Savannah became Eleanor's home. She rented a small apartment near the historic district, decorating it with Thomas's portrait and mementos from her new life. The Silver Readers became her family, their laughter filling her evenings. She volunteered more at the senior center, teaching health workshops and listening to the stories of others like her, people who'd been overlooked but refused to fade. Her relationship with Michael evolved slowly. He called weekly, his tone humbler, and sent photos of Sophie and Ethan. Laura remained cool, but Eleanor didn't mind. She'd learned to let go of what she couldn't control. The trust for the kids was secure, and she'd started saving again, this time for herself. She planned a trip to Italy for the next year, a dream she'd buried long ago. One spring morning, Eleanor walked to Forsyth Park, her journal in hand. She sat by the fountain, watching families and tourists pass by. She wrote about the airport, how it had been the end of one life and the start of another. The betrayal still stung, but it had pushed her to find her strength, her joy. A young woman sat beside her, sketching the fountain. "You look happy," the woman said, glancing at Eleanor's journal. Eleanor smiled. "I am," she said. "It took a long time, but I am." The woman nodded, her pencil moving across the page. "That's beautiful. Mind if I draw you? You've got this. Glow." Eleanor laughed, thinking of Thomas's portrait. "Go ahead," she said, "but make sure you catch the fire in my eyes." As the woman sketched, Eleanor leaned back, the sun warm on her face. She thought of the airport, the hurt, the money she'd taken back. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival, about proving she was more than the sum of others' choices. She'd been abandoned, yes, but she'd found herself. And that, she knew, was worth more than any vacation fund. Her story wasn't over. There were trips to plan, friends to laugh with, grandchildren to love. Eleanor Grayson, 78 and fierce, was just beginning.